Hi friends. It is nice and gloomy outside, the leaves are changing, and the stores are selling Reese's pumpkins. So y'all know what that means.
It's spoopy season.
The first refashion project of this video is more of me finding a garment with really great fabric and harvesting it. I found this awesome suit set that has these little appliques. Look at that. Leaves. So I will be using that fabric to make the McGonagall hat from Fresh Frippery's blog. It is the perfect casual witchy vibes that I live for.
So I bought this at the thrift store for $5.99. It is 100% polyester, but it's got this kind of tweedy wool texture, so I'm okay with that. I'm not going to share too much of my process making this because I'm basically following the directions on Vivien's blog, but I do really want to make sure that I get these appliques on there. So I laid out the pattern pieces and they basically only took up one leg, so I'm going to have tons of fabric to use for another project. Just to really get those appliques where I want them, I'm going to have to open up this hem. So I'm just going to mark my pieces, and I was really careful to match them up with the grain of the fabric. So I realized that I had patterned this with seam allowance in it, so I'm going to go ahead and cut off where I added it extra, except for on the front because I did have to piece that part. I want my hat to be pretty stiff overall and not very floppy, so on the brim I'm using 2 layers of medium weight interfacing. In each ear flap, I'm only putting 1 layer of interfacing. And for the cone, I'm actually using like heavy duty upholstery interfacing. And from there, I just went ahead and sewed the rest of it following the instructions from Vivien's blog. So this is the final product. I think the main differences I have from Vivien's are that I pieced this main part of the cone. I sandwiched the ties between the ear flap pieces instead of adding them on afterwards. And instead of using a traditional hat band, I used this yarn and button situation. Of course, 2 days after I finished this hat, our Queen Bernadette banner came out with a video where she left the lining free floating and then sewed it on instead of trying to fuss around with bias binding, as you can see I did here, so I would recommend looking into that.
The second witchy project that I'll be doing is actually one that I've done before. It is a blanket cape. Literally a cape made out of a blanket. I have one that I've already made and I wear it all the time, and people always ask me, where did you get that? Oh my gosh, it's so great. And of course I say, oh, well, I made it. People are so impressed by that, but it is literally the easiest project. It takes less than 45 minutes. You don't have to have a ton of special tools to do it, and it definitely gives fall witchy vibes. So 10 out of 10, do recommend.
Step 1, go to the thrift store. Step 2, find a blanket. Step 3, check the price on the blanket. Step 4 is fold the blanket in half, look in the mirror and do a weird little wiggle that looks something like this, where you decide if A, the blanket is long enough to cover your torso, and B, see if it's long enough to cover your arms. I decided for this one to make the back a little longer than the front, so I just went ahead and made it, hi cat, made it even. So then you want to take the blanket that's still folded in half and fold it again the other way, lining up the designs to mark where the center is. The one I already have has more of a boat neckline, so I'm going to do this one more as a U. I measured the circumference of my head and picked a plate that was close to that but a little bigger. And then I futzed around and found a measurement close to what the back of my neck was and marked that on my plate using a dry erase marker. So then I centered my plate on the blanket, but made sure to offset it on the fold using the marks I had made. And then I just marked around the outside of the plate using tailor's chalk. And then I did the same thing on what will be the back side, but of course I flipped the plate around to use the smaller edge of my marks. The first time I did this, I just cut the neck hole and the weave on the blanket was loose enough that I could just roll it over twice for a small hem. But this time I am top stitching on a piece of bias binding to the mark from the plate, and I think that will just make a nicer finish. Then I cut close to the top stitch, making sure that I was actually cutting out the neck hole and not cutting into the body of the cape. So then I folded the bias binding to the inside of the cape, ironed and pinned that down, and gave it a top stitch. Once the neck hole was nice and stitched down, I tried it on and made sure it was nice and even on my body, and then kind of marked where I thought the belt holes should go. Then I evened up my marks and sewed 2 buttonholes through the front portion, though you could do front and back if you wanted a more fitted look. If your machine doesn't have a buttonhole stitch, you can kind of fake it with a very short and wide zigzag stitch, or you can just sew your buttonholes by hand. I have a buttonhole foot, so I just picked a button that was the same width as the belt I was planning on using to put in there. Then go ahead and cut open your buttonholes, stick a belt through, and live your best witchy life. In the meantime, I got all fancied up and we took a trip to an apple orchard for peak fall shenanigans. Bye, friends.